Hi, and welcome to Dad's Talk, the podcast. My name is Cahir, and this is where dads are invited along to have real conversations, to share experiences and knowledge, and talk about everything you might expect from separation to emotions. Tonight's podcast touches on thinking of having a baby, parenting, and technology.
I had an interesting conversation with it was actually a single American fella. It was about, and this is maybe a bit contentious topic, conception and how Americans plan births. Because I noticed my daughter was playing netball, and I felt it a bit unfair that some of the kids seemed a little bit bigger, maybe a different age group, and I sort of brought up the conversation that actually, over in America, they're actually putting a lot more thought into where when kids are conceived, so that they appear. If you understand what I'm saying,
So you're saying that
in their class,
right? So
it gives them a bit of an advantage.
Gives them an advantage, yes. And this is
I don't understand that too much, Alan. I'm going to ask the stupid question. What do you mean? How does that give them the advantage?
Well, if you have a child that's starting, they're born on a certain month, there might be a slight year advantage, if you know what I mean. I think
you look at the school year, Cahir. You have children born in June and then children born in July, and the children that are born in June are the youngest in the class.
Yes, that's right. In fact, my son was the youngest in his class, and that was the reason why. Yeah, definitely.
Whenever they start school at 4, it means that the difference of maybe 25% that the youngest or the oldest has lives a quarter more than the youngest. So,
very significant at that age, Pascal. Yeah.
So, do you think what I call the Irishmen think they got down or couples?
Not a chance.
And I suppose I guess it's probably important for our listeners just to make them aware. Also, is that we are a group of separated dads, all of us, and for one reason or another, our relationships have ended, and we're now supporting each other. So we are, and we're using this forum of Dad's Talk, the podcast, just to talk about issues which is real for ourselves and possibly real for a lot of listeners that might be listening in. And I guess what I call it now, reflecting back, whenever Alan, you're talking about your story, it was never something I had thought about the time of the year to conceive or plan for a child. But yet, if you speak to younger people nowadays in relationships who have just got married, they and I'm talking about people from the island of Ireland, that they are planning children. They are definitely planning kids.
I can definitely say I have a friend who is about to give birth in July, and that was planned because she's a teacher and she wanted to work right up until the child was born. And it means that in July, then, those first couple of months, she has off anyway. So I guess we are probably planning it a bit more.
I've heard of that, Dom, where teachers plan their maternity leave, and it works. It seems to work out quite well for some of them, if it's well planned.
What about the dads? But what about the dads? For mum, planning like that, but I wonder, do many dads actually give a lot of thought to a little baby coming along, and the changes that's going to make in their life, in their relationship?
My experience was I became a dad while I was in the final year of university, and my son was born in early March, and it wasn't planned, but if it wasn't for realizing that it was going to be a dad and I had to be prepared, I wouldn't have tried and did as well as I did, sort of thing. That kind of pushed me on, that motivated me.
At university, that pushed you on?
Yeah, I was living in England. I was living in Liverpool. I've been with my ex for 3 years nearly at that point. We met the first 2 days of uni. and we were together from then. Basically, it was crazy. But yeah, so we had him in final year, and yeah, it was mad. We had my family coming over, her family coming over to sort of help with the kids, so we could do focus groups and interviews and dissertation, all that kind of stuff. It was a bit
Uh-huh.
crazy. But then once I had one, we decided very, very quickly we wanted to have the next one because we wanted them to grow up together. So there's only 16 months between my boys, and then there's a slightly bigger gap between my boys and my daughter. But it worked out quite well, actually. Like, you have that sort of 2 or 3 years where they're both under 3, and it was really challenging, because they were very different babies. But with the age, what you were mentioning before as well about planning and conception, my younger son is one of the eldest in the year, and that's really, really helped him out over here. So he has like a speech and language need, and it's possibly undiagnosed, but he's maybe on the spectrum, but it's not overly obvious. But the fact that he's one of the eldest in the years means that he copes a bit better with the work that he's doing. Because he's, and he gets speech therapy and things to help with that too. But it's kind of unintentionally. But whenever you're brought up about planning for certain times a year for kids to have maybe a physical edge or something, it actually kind of makes sense to me. But even like just educationally, because that's really made a difference in my son. Like his ability to cope.
I mean, you know what I mean. I asked and I acted stupid whenever you spoke about that, Alan. But I would consider myself to be an older dad now. In fact, I'm a granddad. That's just put it.
You don't look at Cahir.
But I think what I call it. Whenever I was much younger, I wouldn't have thought like that. But then that was a generation ago almost. So it was. But I do think that, when younger dads probably are more savvy that way now, thinking that way. And a good point, and I guess, that kind of leads me to thinking then, well, for new dads, there must be loads of special moments that dads have, really good memories of whenever the children came along, because people often say, look, yeah, as Wayne has said, it's better to have two together rather than two apart, because, they're around the same age. It's easier. So it is. And it's good companionship for each of the wee ones as well, and that could be you can create great memories that way as well. So you can work, with the two children.
I think it's just nowadays with technology and stuff. My 9-year-old I swear, he is like a teenager. It's a bit scary. Just the technology wise, the kids with their, phones and tablets and what they watch, they're very clued in, and they speak about memes and things that I don't know about, but it's like things that maybe my friends would know about. And I'm just like,
speak a different language, really.
It scares me. Like, you always get these letters from the school about watch what they're watching and this and that and gaming and things. I just feel like nowadays kids' kind of growth is, the childhood innocence goes a bit earlier than maybe what it would have been, because kids are just exposed to so much more nowadays. Like my eldest, he's got the moods and attitudes of a teenager at times, and I still talk to him like he's 6 or 7, and he's just like, Dad, you're old, I'm like,
Wayne, I think what I call it, Martin, and you take this in the right way, Martin, because obviously maybe you and I are probably from the same generation,
Yeah.
So I'm presuming what I call it. That's the good generation too. But I'm just presuming our children probably grew up in the same era also, and whenever I reflect back on my kids growing up and children growing up now in families, it's much harder for families nowadays.
I'd agree with that.
Because, especially because of what Wayne was referring to, technology and the way technology is moving so fast and children's reliance upon it and then its influence. Whereas our kids growing up, Martin, my children anyhow, it was magazines, it was new jeans, it was hair dye in the house, it was getting the brother and sister to do that if that was, if they were available. It was nightclubs, baking, buns and scones and all of them things. And you didn't have Love Island on the television. You had nothing like that. And And even for them growing up, I mean, I remember us getting Sky in here. That was such a big deal because we only had so many channels on the TV before that. But
we had Sky in a playroom, and my oldest daughter now this is before smartphones, but my oldest daughter was obsessed with these American sort of sitcom, these kiddie programs, and she was just like Google-eyed on this, and then I had to disconnect it, and I says, look, it's broken. I actually physically disconnected the Sky from the room, and it says, look, it's broken because she was so addicted to it, But
I used
yeah,
that same trick with
yeah.
my
But
kids.
even Karen, whenever we're talking about our generation, like I guess Tom and Jerry, they were always sort of fighting, and
Aye.
that was probably acceptable then. But now you bring it up to the current time, maybe not so acceptable, because there was stuff that was acceptable maybe back in the 70s and 80s, which are not, politically correct now.
Yes. Tom would have to apologize now, wouldn't he?
Yeah,
the magic roundabout.
Mm.
yeah.
But now it's YouTube, and I've seen little kids get quite angry when you tell them no. Whenever there's a time, when you've been on there for an hour and you're literally scrolling through what sounds to us like either white noise or somebody screeching the entire time, and whatever it's doing, it's really engaging them. But I don't know. It's something I worry about. My son's 6, and he's shown great skill in using like a tablet, but hasn't really shown interest in specific things yet, on a show. And I do worry at some point that's going to be his show, and you're going to have to be disciplined in terms of the time he's going to spend on it, and not using it as a reward, or do you give it them every evening, or do you and then taking it away as a punishment if they're not behaving themselves. It's a whole new different way of parenting, I think, because for us in the past, my mom will hopefully forgive me for sharing this, but like when we were bold, we were put out in the shed. There wasn't a naughty step, there was a naughty shed, and you were put out there to reflect on what you did.
I got the coal bunker.
Yeah.
Okay.
And it didn't do us any harm.
This is the question. I know that Cahir, you've talked about that in programs and so on, about different parenting styles and what's became not appropriate, and what's what we were maybe brought up with, when how we adapt to that as parents now, like what we think is okay and not okay.
Yes,
But
yeah.
sorry, go on.
No, Martin or Dominic, but
Yeah.
I think it's not about having answers here. It's really just about having that conversation. And I think that, all of us were brought up in a very different environment, depending on our families, depending on our parents, depending on their background, depending on their employment, depending on their upbringing and stuff like that. But some of us were born in a different century. Now, let's agree with that. So things were done differently. They were done differently. And things are very different nowadays. And I guess that's why we're saying that, yeah, I mean, for children and for young families now planning to have kids, do they know how difficult it might be for them whenever the kids begin to grow, particularly with technology, and having as a parent to navigate around that, and the safety issues to do with it, and the concerns as well. We talked a lot about growing up, Martin, if you'll agree with this, that parents had a third parent in the house, and that was the television.
Yeah.
It was always in the corner, and that's one of the things that my parents always used to talk about, particularly having this third parent, because there was 13 of us, and everybody always sat around watching it, and learning from it. Whereas nowadays, I mean, it's a parent in their pocket. They're carrying around, walking around, even then going to bed.
But you could look at it in another way, Cahir, in that it's nearly easier now to discipline kids, because you just take their device off them, and that's the discipline, So just if they misbehave,
it's a big deal to them.
Yeah. Oh, it's a massive deal. It's a massive punishment, So
But can you discipline them too much then? Like, you're putting time limits on them. Is there a certain level, using the tablet or technology as a sort of carrot to get things done?
But I think this is a key point, like when you separate from somebody as well. So like whenever I was with my partner, we had no tablets or technology at bedtime. Bedtime was always story, comics, or a board game, silly game. And we had that and we stuck to that rigidly. But then when we separated and you're both on your own with three young children, it's changed, you know, it's became the boys now do have their tablets and stuff at bedtime and like all those rules changed and that became like a contentious point for us. But I just felt like it's so stimulating that see now with my eldest, he can be quite apprehensive about going bowling or going and ice skating or going and doing other things because he just wants to game.
Hmm.
You know, and he won't enjoy doing something different with me until I physically got him there doing it. He'll kind of complain because he wants to game. And this is something that never really used to be
Very
the case.
addictive. Very
Yeah,
addictive.
like it's just so it's dopaminergically, it's like so
Yes.
stimulating for the brain. And it's really hard to match what young brains especially can get from that. Like even as adults, you think about phones, it's quite
Mm.
people are just constantly, you know, putting the
Well,
phone
that was going to be my point,
like
that we have to be role models around it, because I've seen so many parents out on their phones with their kids, and the kids are looking at that phone. They might be not even be old enough to have a phone yet, and they go, "What is that? I want that." Clearly, that's something very interesting, and it's something I think about a lot. That when I'm with my son, is the phone's taken out to take pictures, and that's it. It's put away because, well, first of all, our time's so short, but also you just want to show them that, I'm not using this as a barrier to boredom, or there's time in between you getting on the slide or getting off the slide. I'm like, no, I'm focused on you because you're most important. This phone is not.
But for many kids, it's a crutch, Tom. It's if they're out in an awkward situation, they use their phone, to get over the awkwardness. You see
That's
it all the
it.
time.
Can I go back to one of the things that Wayne was talking about, Wayne, and that is, I mean, we're all sitting here again, separated fathers, separated dads, and we're talking about technology with our kids and stuff. But you brought a really good point, and that is that after you separate, then
yeah.
things change, and you've got to then do this as a separated dad, as a non-resident dad in your new residence with your children whenever they come along, and that could be really difficult because it's not teamwork anymore in a lot of cases, because you're not in that same relationship living with your partner or your ex-partner, and I think that's a big thing as well. So it is, especially with dads who have been in a relationship that has ended. I mean, they still want to be with their children, they still are seeing their children, but maybe it's difficult as well, being that authoritative parent and showing them that they love their kids.
Absolutely. Just you can see with the courts and the children and them speaking to a social worker, and for many months I remember being so concerned with the kids just being happy when they were with me. Like my actual best interest in the children and my belief of we're not having technology at this time, I did that decipher it because I was focused on just trying to keep my children happy with me because I was anxious about court and I was anxious about the social worker, and what was going to be said. And that became like a thing where they're allowed to do it at mum's house, but they're not allowed to do it at dad's house. And then everything then it gets turned a wee bit at times. But I tried to bring this up with my ex the previous July or something, and it just didn't go down well, like it was, I think, emotionally where we were at. But in my opinion, that's a big thing too when you're going through the separation stage and everything. Like I became conscious of just trying to keep all three of my children happy in my limited time with them,
And
as opposed to
you know what? And I think this is a topic that what I call it that we could maybe come back to through Dad's Talk, a podcast, maybe at another time.
I would agree with Wayne there because I was in the same situation, different houses, different rules, so I would agree with you, Wayne, there. I seen that too. And things have to slide a wee bit whenever you're in these circumstances as well,
Yeah.
But unfortunately, it can be used as a bit of a bartering tool to curry favor and to make the other side feel worse and so on. As Cahir said, this probably deserves its own podcast, this very topic.
Yeah.
I think so, because I think that it's probably really, it's real. It's emotive. It's difficult. So it is, in a changing environment for dads, for separated dads, because all that they want to be is loving and supportive with their kids, but yet they've got to try and figure everything out. And I do think that maybe a Dad's Talk, the podcast, we should talk about this particular topic. And I guess on that, folks, look, you know what? I'm just going to say to everybody listening, thanks for listening, because we're happy here having this conversation, and putting that conversation out there to people. And hopefully people who have been listening will join in again for the next session of Dad's Talk, the podcast, when we'll come up with another topic, another subject, and sit and have a real conversation and talk about lived experiences that we hope other people can relate to and enjoy. So thanks, everybody.